All right, I don't know how many people have been following the Kavanaugh hearings, which happened last night or yesterday during the day, all through yesterday. All I can say is I don't think we've ever seen anything like it in this country. Um, at least not to the point of where we had immediate responses from the people, as opposed to the information going to a news press and then you know the country finding out the next day kind of what happened, or something along the lines of 1950s into about the 2000 era where we would have seen it on television, and again we would have waited for a response the next day when people would have started paying attention. Or we would have got op-eds in like the New York Times, the Washington Post, and all sorts of other newspaper agencies, the Associated Press, and then we'd start to hear all sorts of different responses from different people, kind of on how they feel. I found it really fascinating. We kind of got a really good glimpse on this is how our country works, or doesn't. Um, Depending on kind of how you look at it. There was a lot of drama going back and forth, a lot of tears, a lot of crying, a lot of stuff. Here's a recap. Ford, who claims that Kavanaugh assaulted her, attempted to rape her 36 years ago, um, looked very credible. Maybe telling the truth. I think she was, personally, but my opinion really doesn't matter. The rest of America felt she was a credible witness. The big juxtaposition right here we've got is whether or not people believe that Kavanaugh was actually the person in the room doing that. And that's kind of where doubt has fallen into the whole case. Again, my opinion doesn't really matter. But I think it's kind of important to see this from the political standpoint on kind of how this is how things work. Right now, the Republicans have charge of the Senate. They have the higher number of votes, and they have a vice president that is the tiebreaker should there be one. Which means whatever happens is going to happen because the Republicans decide to let it happen. Now, one or two Republicans may side with the other side on this particular issue, but I suspect it's not going to be what the Democrats are actually hoping for. The Democrats, on the other hand, are pretty close to catching up to the majority, but they're not there. And they may not be there until after the midterms, which are happening in November. Now, there's all sorts of speculation as to what's going to happen based on the election coming up, the whole Me Too movement and everything else, garnering all sorts of support for the Democratic Party. But is it enough? Is it enough to cause people who vote the way they always vote to change the way they vote? Or enough to rally enough people who don't generally vote to vote for one particular side? The problem we've got is we don't know that right now, and the get out the vote thing that's kind of going out right now on both sides, because here's the thing. Democrats tend to be really good at rallying a lot of young people who who don't generally vote, but the Republicans are out there trying to get numbers too. It's just you don't hear too much about it because, well, sadly enough, the media is basically controlled by one side, or most of the media. Now, when I say that, I want to make the point that that doesn't mean it's biased. It just means there's one side that's probably better represented. It doesn't mean they're actually changing the message of what's going out there. It's just we're hearing one specific side of what's going on out there. That's kind of part of my criticism of the 2016 election, where I suspected a lot of the information we were getting wasn't actually correct, not because there was bias in it, but because the majority of the people who were being polled tended to be from one side. And that's different than the whole fake news kind of thing that kind of fell into the main conversation. And it fed into all sorts of fake news itself, because it wasn't fake news. It was just a lot of people who tended to side on one side were easier for the media to access to get the information from. So if you did a poll, it was much harder to find conservatives. And I think that's kind of where the problem exists. And it's probably where it still exists. Anyway, so getting back to the Supreme Court nomination. So we're kind of stuck in an area where Senator Flake has actually now stood up and said he wants to see an investigation. Kavanaugh did everything physically possible, mentally possible, to avoid even talking about the word investigation. And that's probably where the perception that there's something wrong happened. And for an attorney, for a judge, for a smart man, you know, a Yale graduate, pretty sure it was Yale, how do you possibly think you're going to get away with a conversation with the other side? And when they ask for an investigation, you keep bringing up these three names that you got and say, well, this is my evidence that, you know, I've got all of these people who are on record. They weren't on record. And that's where the problem was. It was a bunch of people who made phone calls to other people, and then they started throwing out this narrative, a very false narrative, I might add, that these were official names or these were sworn statements. Here's the difference. A sworn statement legally is something that is a signed document that you had attorneys and everybody involved. A sworn statement is not pinky sworn. And that's kind of what we were getting from that hearing, where he was trying to convolute those two meanings together to where people would think, okay, sworn statement, we had affidavits, we had all of these other kinds of things. We didn't. And that's probably where the bigger problem came in. And when you start to really throw in all sorts of ambiguities to really, really smart people asking you questions, and then you start to play games with your responses. I mean, let's face it, not everybody is, you know, President Bill Clinton, who can literally define or redefine the word is, or was it, one of those two. But I mean, but you get the idea. It takes a really smart person who's really glib to do that. You don't do it when you're crying, angry, and basically trying to avoid answering questions. And that's kind of what happened. So we're now at a place where we may have an investigation. I suspect, unless there's some kind of weird evidence going back. I mean, there is something with the calendar, the July 1st date or something like that, that may actually say the opposite of what he's been telling as his narrative. That could cause all sorts of problems. And maybe that's what they don't want to talk about. I know when their investigator person, the Republicans, when she started asking him questions about that particular date, they shut it down. And we never saw her again. So I think she's buried in a ditch somewhere, and they don't want anyone to know anything about her. And the fact that she broke party line, or I don't know what it is, but you get the idea. There may be something there. And if you get the FBI involved, these are people who will follow this up. And I think that's kind of where the Republicans are a little nervous. Because when you start an investigation, you don't know what you're gonna find, what they're gonna find, and that's always scary. I mean, I wouldn't want anyone investigating me. I haven't done anything wrong, but I can't tell you where my stuffed animals have been every night. Think about that. Anyway, so that's kind of where we are right now. I just thought I would do a little bit of an update on the political science narrative of kind of what's going on. I don't have an opinion. One thing I do want to share with people, because this bothers me a lot, I know people are partisan, okay? People feel one way or another on a particular issue. You're going to discover, especially if you're on Facebook, on Twitter, there are people who disagree with you. I have tons of people who disagree with me. I'm fine with that. I know I'm kind of a nutso kind of a person that's kind of all over the place on everything that he talks about. There are times where I'm a socialist, I'm a communist, I'm a anarchist, I'm a strong, staunch Republican, I become a Democrat, I become all sorts of different things. And by the way, all of those are going to be used against me one day. You know, when I'm running for Emperor of Earth and someone's going to throw all of those designations in my face and you now actually have tape of me saying it, man, that's going to suck. But I had to do it for this podcast just to let people know. But I mean, the point is, I have different people who disagree with me on all sorts of things. Some of my very best friends, ideologically, are opposite of me. That's kind of why we're friends, because we can talk about all sorts of different things and still get along. You know, you can do that. You don't have to go into this anger mode of kind of like what everybody kind of feel like I have something on my face and it's just I can't find it. So I guess it's not there. A conspiracy theory. There was something there. Now, anyway, so the idea is we have so many different views on so many different things, and that's what our country is right now. And we should be able to sit down and talk about these things. Now, if I want big government, you want small government, I want small government, you want big government, we can kind of have those things. And we can have a middle ground where we have a little bit of each thing. That's what the founding fathers wanted. I mean, that's what they put together when they created this government. Neither side was saying it must be my way or I'm out of here. There were some of them like that, but when everybody becomes like that, we got real problems here. And that may be the thing we need to address. Addressing whether or not Kavanaugh goes on to the Supreme Court, yeah, that may be important for specific things you're worried about. If you're a Democrat, you're probably thinking of abortion and other such issues that he's probably going to help to get rid of. If you're on the other side, you probably have all sorts of, you know, anti-states' rights kinds of things that you're probably trying to fight against. Or you may be a proponent of killing off abortion. That's, for some reason, becomes the big issue right here. People ask me how I feel about it, and I keep saying I don't. I understand people do care about it. It's not my issue, okay? I'm all about stuffed animals. I've told you that before, and Diet Dr. Pepper. Well, if you could see it inside here, it's Diet Dr. Pepper. But anyway, those are literally my issues, all I really care about. And Star Trek, I care a lot about Star Trek. I really don't know how to make that better. I wish I could make Star Trek good again. Put good ones on the air. That's something like that. Okay, anyway, so that's kind of all I really have for today. I just wanted an update on the kind of that whole Kavanaugh thing. And the reason I wanted to do an update was because I think we're kind of going off the rails here. We don't really hate each other, at least we shouldn't. We're all supposed to be Americans, I would think, you know. We never had a good word for like United Statens. I guess Americans were stuck with, even though America is 2 continents. Anyway, and so all I can say is at the end of the day, we're still going to be part of the same country. I don't think half of us wants to leave, although the narrative sometimes gets to that point. I say narrative a lot, I'm starting to notice, but it gets to that point where I think we're talking too much about it when nobody really wants to leave. People like being here. I like being here. There are some things that can be fixed, and I don't think we're trying to fix them. I think we're just like fighting with each other a little too much, so we're not paying attention to things that need to get fixed. Maybe that's part of the problem as well. We'll get much more into all these kinds of things later. Most of my casts, as you know, are about writing or weird things that I talk about. Maybe a couple of computer games I play here and there. By the way, I'm playing XCOM 2 right now heavily. I am enjoying it. I hope they make further expansions to it, or XCOM 3. Those would all be great things. Make XCOM 3 great again. MX, you get the idea. Okay, so all I got today. Stay real, have fun, may the force be with you, live long and prosper, something like that. Okay, out of here.